Okay, let's do this. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the very first episode of Look Mum, I'm Failing, powered by Song Division. My name's Sam McNeil, General Manager, Singer, Songwriter, Performer, Facilitator, and all-round absolute legend. It says that in the script, I have to say it. On each episode of Look Mum, I'm Failing, we will interview a business leader and or a full-time professional creative artist. We'll talk common themes and strategies to endure and maybe even enjoy the process of setbacks, mistakes, challenges and failure. To kick things off, I'm very excited to be doing this one. It's a solo interview coming to you live from CVENT CONNECT EUROPE. I'm fortunate enough to be interviewing CVENT CEO and founder, the one and only Reggie Aggarwal. Reggie has truly stood the test of time. We talk all kinds of things like crazy credit card debt, his time as a practicing lawyer, work-life balance, and everything in between. Super excited about this one. Enjoy, everyone.
1, 2, 3, 4. You piece of shit. Look, Mom, I'm failing. Look, Mom, I'm failing. Look, Mom, I'm failing. Hurry up and watch me fall.
Let's get into it. Really excited to have you on stage. Give it up for the one and only CVENT CEO, Reggie Aggarwal. Okay, so Reggie, we've got 20 minutes. You've had a fascinating life. We wouldn't even get close to covering it all. So I want to just jump forward a little bit past childhood and talk about your period studying law and practicing law for around 9 years before starting CVENT. What did you learn in that time and what mistakes did you make or see practicing law that helped you be better equipped to start and run CVENT?
So when starting my career, you're asking the question about what I did after law school and what kind of got me into it. So look, I went to law school because first as an Indian American, my parents gave me two choices. They said you could be an engineer or a doctor. I kind of disappointed them when I said I wanted to be a lawyer. And a couple things I first learned is I became a lawyer because in high school I did something called the debate team. And back at a young age, people said, hey, you sound like someone who'd be a good lawyer because you're a good debater. And the first lesson I learned there was I made a 50-year decision, which is usually to become an attorney or a lawyer, because something I learned when I was a child. So that's the path I took. And I went to law school, practiced law for about 5 years, and I kind of realized that I didn't want to be a lawyer. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't my passion. And so I've always been entrepreneurial. Since I was a kid, I always ran businesses. I never really worked for traditional companies, painted houses, ran a snow removal business. And this is all I did as a high school student or college student. So I think when I went to law, I did it because a lot of adults told me that that's what I'd be good at. It was a good thing to do. And but it wasn't really what my passion was. And then, but it exposed me to a lot. I got to see a lot of different things as a lawyer. I worked for a large corporate law firm, and that kind of led me to starting an organization where it was a nonprofit that I started that gave me kind of a chance to organize events professionally. And that's what kind of gave me the idea of saying, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur, because I was essentially the event planner, the secretary and the president of this nonprofit. And then that was where my passion was, instead of being a lawyer. And then I kind of pivoted and said, you know what, I think I'm going to go be an entrepreneur and start a company in that business.
Great. And just paint the picture for everyone. So you're CEO, you're the founder and president, Indian CEO, High Tech Council.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And you're having to organize their events?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
What happened is I graduated from law school in 94. So I'm kind of aging myself, but a couple years later, I start this nonprofit. I saw in the Washington, D.C. area, which is where I grew up, I saw that there was a big burgeoning technology community. And I took as a good marketer, I took a sector of it, which was CEOs who were Indian. I brought them together because they wanted to meet each other, and basically started to organize events. And we started having 5 or 6 events a year to 50 events. We expanded it to non-Indians. And again, another lesson I learned is when you get 100% of your market share, how do you expand your market? So we went from having just Indians in it. We had about 100. And then once we had them involved, then I said, hey, let's get anyone. It doesn't matter what your ethnic background is. And we grew to about 1,500. And in that time period, we went from having 5, 6 events a year to 50 events a year. And then again, I used basically Excel, Outlook, and yellow sticky notes. That's how I ran the events. And it was a very painful process.
Right. That there was nothing like a CVENT at that time?
Yeah,
like
no, there was
software?
Certainly not software. Back when I started the group, it was installed software.
Right.
And people never heard of email marketing or online event registration. And that wasn't really the thing back then. So.
Yeah. Wow. So this is 99?
96.
96
when I started it,
CVENT.
and by 99, after 3 years of running that and working full-time, I was working about 50 to 60 hours as a lawyer, 20 to 30 hours a week running this nonprofit.
Wow.
And then I was like, I can't do both of them. And so I said, I still have a passion for the nonprofit, so I'll quit my job. And then I started a company that basically, so whenever you start a company, the biggest thing and the easiest thing to do is you simply find a pain point and then create the aspirin. And the aspirin in that case was online registration.
Wow. And so that's 25, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
A lot has happened outside of anyone's control. I'm thinking, I know .com bubble bursts, 9/11 happens, global financial crisis.
You're bringing back some bad memories.
Yeah. Well, we're here to talk about setbacks and challenges. I call these the big four.
Yeah.
Which one of those was the most challenging time for you and CVENT, or was it none of those? Was there another time where you found it really tough?
Look, there's a lot of, in your journey of building a business, there's lots of tough times. Usually when you start a business, you're excited, you have great, an idea, and the enthusiasm's strong. You run into some, you always run into challenges. I will tell you that during the .com meltdown, that was clearly the most difficult part of my life. And the reason was because we had everything hit at once. In the U.S., it had September 11th, the .com meltdown. You had the greatest recession for technology that we had seen. And what had happened, unfortunately, is everything was really high. So it wasn't just going kind of like if you go like this and then go like this. It went like this and then like this. Yeah. And so I'll tell you, the difficulty of falling. And so what happened is that when I first started the company, I did it kind of the old-fashioned way. I lived at my parents'. I graduated from law school, saved a bunch of money, funded the company out of my savings. My parents were kind enough to give me their equivalent of their pension because they believed in they believed in their son, and they didn't really understand the business I was doing. They called it party planning. And they're like, I'm not sure if you want to go from being a lawyer to a party planner, And I said, no, it's not party planning, Mom and Dad. And, again, they say, you sure you don't want to be a doctor? If you're going to pivot your career, why not go to medical school? So anyways, but having said all that, what happened is that we kind of slowly grew. Then the .com boom happened, and we, went from self-funding, and all of our competitors were about 500 online event registration companies that were kind of created. And so everyone was raising money, so we did kind of what everyone else did, and so we raised a bunch of money. We raised $17 million, and we grew to 125 employees from just 5 or 6 of us, and everything was going great. But then when the .com meltdown, September 11th, reality hit, what you learn is that just because you build something, people say if you build it, people will come. That's not what will happen. You build it, nobody cares. You have to make sure it's a compelling product. And it was still kind of new to use email, to use online registration. And so what happened, and then when all those other bad things happened at once, we basically blew through all our money hiring people, put out a product, and then when we didn't get the customers, and there was no more funding, we had to cut 80% of our staff. So we went from 125 down to 24, and we're, on the verge of bankruptcy. And that's when the tough journey begins. And this is, where what I've learned about entrepreneurs is, look, most people should not be entrepreneurs. Yeah. The reality is people don't realize, like for me, I didn't take a salary for 3 years. I put everything into the company. I put $400,000 on my credit cards. So you have all this stuff that you don't hear about, and then most companies fail. And most people don't hear about the failures, where in the U.S., it's 94% of startups fail. And you don't hear about them because they never made it off the radar for you to hear about them. And so, but that's where the real entrepreneur journey begins, is not when you start the company, it's how you get through the difficult times.
100%.
And so, that was, kind of where, that's where our culture was built also.
Yeah, it's really impressive. Just speak to that really quickly. How does your approach change to a company that you and your family are heavily invested in, versus a company that you've got a whole bunch of angel investment and external money? How does that mindset change? Yeah,
sure. So in the beginning, like I said, it was kind of self-funded. And then we had 100 angel investors. That CO group that I'd created, I went to them and raised money for them when I raised that $17 million. So we went from kind of a family business to raising outside investors. And one, you never want to have 100 investors, because when things go bad, you're getting 100 phone calls, calling you up and asking for their money back, and or saying what's going on. And they're not paying customers. So that's a tough thing to be talking to your paying customers and then people who are your investors. But what it changes is you become more professional. So one of the nice disciplines that happens is, look, our investors were some pretty prestigious people. We had the president of NASDAQ, the worldwide chairman of McKinsey, the president of MCI, which was a large telecom company. So we had some really strong people invest. And for me, it was great mentorship, because they all, I got a lot of good advice. But what happens is you go from kind of running a smaller company to thinking scale. And when you build that in your DNA early, it changes who you are, because they're not investing for small companies. They're like, how do you take this? So that was a good thing. The negative thing is we weren't ready for scale. We were a small startup, and we're going into a new space, inventing a new category, if you will. And so those didn't blend together very well. In particular, when you're hitting turbulent times like September 11th, the dot-com meltdown, and the greatest technology recession that we've seen so far. So that didn't kind of mesh. And then that's where, again, 95% of companies failed. I mean, it was incredible in a 2-year period that 95% of all the internet companies failed. And at the end, it ended up being an opportunity, because those who survived, ended up being able to hopefully thrive, because they got through that and really built, their inner power.
Yeah. Wow. Has there been a time in the last 30 years where you've just said, I don't think I can do this anymore, or I don't want to do this anymore, I'm out?
It happened this morning. I'm just joking. For this podcast, I'm like, no, I'm just joking.
Got to go on a stupid podcast.
Look, I'll tell you, it happens all the time, where you're tired. Running a business is tiring, and it takes, every fiber of your body to run it. And I'll tell you a couple inside reasons. One is, being a CEO or a top executive, most of the energy you get is negative. And the reason is when you, and this is very positive, by the way, this conference, because I'm meeting with just so many customers, and it's great, because a lot of times they're polite. They don't want to tell you how good things are going, and they feel uncomfortable telling you the bad things. But certainly when we were smaller, I got involved with whenever a customer's upset. Like I didn't get on a call when someone's happy. That's not when they call the CEO in. The CEO's in when there's a challenge with an employee leaving or a problem happening. And so most of the times, I would say 90% of what you're doing in the beginning, and certainly the first decade, is it seems like maybe 90, maybe it's like 70% is just, it's negative energy, because it's always problems. No one brings up positives. And even when something positive happens, you digest it for an hour and you're on to the next challenge. And so what I'll tell you is that it takes a strong personality to get through that. That's kind of one of the big things about being an entrepreneur or a CEO. But now, like when I look at it, though, when it's really easy, you just put everything in perspective. And there's nothing more that I'd rather do than this. And so, look, on a personal level, we've had a lot of success over the 25 years. We've had exits, so we've been able to monetize the business. But what you learn is that people actually don't build businesses for the money. They really don't, because life is about just having different experiences, having passion. It's about helping people. For me, what's exciting is, for example, watching people. They don't realize the fun it is to watch someone you hire as an associate and then become a vice president or a director. And because you make impact. Life is about impact, no matter what you do. So if you're a nonprofit, you make impact. That gives you passion. If you run a business, even if you're in a job and you help your customer. And that's what life is impact, what I've learned. And that's what keeps people at companies. That's what keeps people motivated. They want to be heard. They want to make impact. And so for me, let's say I could retire, but people go, why don't you retire? I was like, what would I do? Like, where could I make such impact? But at a company like this, I can make real impact. And that's what makes life exciting and passionate, at least for me.
Everyone I've interviewed, CEOs, entrepreneurs, and creative artists, have all said the same thing. Like, I couldn't see myself doing anything else. And also, I'm definitely not doing it for the money, especially some of the musicians I've interviewed. Yeah. It's making an impact, changing lives, and that purpose for them. There's nothing else that they would or want to do.
Yeah, impact is kind of the equivalent of purpose. Mm-hmm. That's maybe a factor into purpose. And so, but once you find that purpose, that passion, that impact that you can make, then from there, you don't really think about it as a job.
You've talked a little bit about the importance of work-life balance, and you seem like a big family guy. How do you approach that?
Look,
in your position,
when you're an entrepreneur, and again, each entrepreneur, because there's many entrepreneurs in the audience who are running their own agencies or other parts of their business. But I will tell you, there wasn't a lot of work-life balance in the beginning. Like, it was all in. We were working 90, 100 hours a week. I'll give you a story that just to tell you the culture that occurred back when the dot-com boom happened. Same thing's kind of happening in some places with AI in terms of these startups. But I remember when you joined CVENT, and this is a true story, people give 2 weeks notice in the U.S. That's what the custom is. I give 2 weeks notice to my employer. We're like, hey, no problem. You should give the notice. You've been there for a few years. Give them time to transition. And then we're like, it's no problem, but we expect you here at 5 p.m. to work from 5 to 10. And if you're not willing to work from 5 to 10 p.m., people go, what? I'm working my other job. I'm going to start in 2 weeks. No. The world is moving so fast. We need you starting tomorrow, and just come from 5 to 10. And then if they didn't do it, we didn't think they were the right DNA to be at CVENT, because we're like, you're not working hard enough if you're not willing to work 5 to 10 for 2 weeks. And then when they came, we expected minimum 50, 60-hour weeks because we were changing the world. And that's the kind of attitude you had. And then we grew like this, and everyone's excited. And then everything changes when reality hits. But so you do have to work, let's be clear, you do have to work really hard. That's a big part of success, is just working hard. You have to work harder than others. You don't have to be smarter than others necessarily, but working hard, being passionate, and certainly it helps. But having said that, is it sustainable to be like that and have a work-life balance? And it isn't sustainable. But look, we did it for like a decade. So I'll just tell you, we did that. Now, as I've grown older and more wiser, having that work-life balance is more important. And what I would say to you, what I recommend people is to pick one passion and just make sure you don't compromise it. Whatever it is, just pick something that you can really work around. And look to have a sustainable business. And that's not the culture we expect now from our people, because again, it's not sustainable. They're not the entrepreneur. They're not building, they're not the business owner, and you can't expect that. But what I'll tell you for me is probably, look, my most important thing is my family, my kids. A lot of my happiness comes from them. I showed a video of my daughter, and I'll tell people, like, in life, it takes a lot for me to get really happy. Like, if we do something nice, I'm happy for a day. Like, for example, when my daughter got into college, I was happy for a month. And it's because you live through the eyes of your children. As you grow older, that becomes where you get a happiness from. For me, at least. I shouldn't say for everyone. But having said that, you don't necessarily have a work-life balance when you start a business, but over time, you hopefully were able to get one. But look, we love what we do, and we still work a lot of hours because we love it, and my family kind of blends themselves into a lot of what I do. So, for example, when I go to Connects, my family used to always come every time. When I travel, my family would come with me. I would try to expose them. I try to incorporate them and give them they get a lot of downside of having a father that works a lot of hours, but then the upside is I expose them to things. And so that's one of the ways I blended it. But in general, you just have to find what's important and find the time to do it.
Amazing. Okay, got a couple of minutes. I'm going to throw some random cliches at you.
Okay.
And you're going to give me a score out of 1 to 10 as to how important they've been to you personally.
Okay.
Okay. Empathy.
10 is the best, 1 is the worst,
10's
just
the
to be
best.
clear. Empathy, I would probably say an 8.
Okay. And you can speak to them if you want to, or you can just give me a number.
And once you give them, I'll go backwards and speak of the ones that I think make sense.
Hustle.
I put that as a 10.
Okay. Resilience.
11.
A sense of humour.
9.
9.
I'd put it as a 10, but I'm not very funny. So
Stop it. You're getting more laughs than me. A solid support base, and that can be family or professional.
Well, you're hitting all these. These are not. These are 10s.
What? Okay, maybe let's go the other way. What's something that you hear that people talk about being super important, and you think I think that's overrated?
In terms of, let's say, being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Look, you hear probably that the resilience, hard work,
Luck.
Yeah. Well, luck's also 11. A lot of life success is definitely. I would put 40% of our success is luck. Wow. Yeah, just because like the fact that I met, let's say, some of my co-founders. If you met the wrong person, the fact that you met a customer that believed in you early. I mean, there's so many things that are fortunate. You're at the right position at the right time. Maybe if I would have met someone younger and got married and then had a family, I couldn't have worked for no salary for 3 years. I'm just telling you, life is a lot of fortuitous things. and they kind of have, maybe a different way of revealing themselves. But now you're asking a very tough question. What is the attributes that aren't important?
That you look back and think, I may be worried about that too much, or I sweat that too much.
I would say urgency.
Okay.
I'll tell you, building a business is a lot about patience. You think something's going to happen quickly, and it's like in your life, in your relationships, in things that you do, whether it's your career development, things just take time. So sometimes it's just being patient, because when things are always urgent, that's not necessarily the right tack to take. Doesn't mean you don't have urgency in solving problems for your customers. That's a different type. But I'll just tell you from a life journey, have patience, not urgency for everything, because that might lead you in the wrong direction. Maybe that's one. I know I'm having a hard time thinking of some of the other attributes. Yeah.
What a way to finish it. Yeah. That's it. Painless enough.
Thank you so much.
Hey, give it up for Reggie, everyone. Thank you so much.
Look, Mom, I'm failing. Look, Mom, I'm failing. Look, Mom, I'm failing. Hurry up and watch me fall.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of Look, Mum, I'm Failing. Please be sure to hit like, subscribe, or click whatever button means that you hear from us as each episode goes live. Speaking of which, next episode coming out in 2 weeks, another live episode with 2 guests. I'll be coming to you live from IMEX Las Vegas, and I'm fortunate enough to be interviewing IMEX CEO Karina Bauer, one of my favorite people, and another one of my absolute favorite people in the world, Mr. John Lombardo, an incredible singer, performer, and client executive at Song Division, who has many, many stories to tell. We talk hard work, we talk addiction, we talk events, we talk pandemics, and more. Make sure you click like, subscribe, so you find out when that episode is live. See you then.